Yeah, good evening. Great to have you with us that time of week again. The last tackle, 6 o'clock on a Wednesday, which means it's time to talk all things rugby league. And alongside me to do just that, Kyle Amor and Paul Sculthorpe. Gents, loads to talk about on the field. That's where we're going to try and keep this show for the next half an hour, because I know there's a lot going on off the field. But let's just talk about the action that's been and gone and what's coming up as well. Another really big week in the Betfred Super League. Great time of year, isn't it? Easter just around the corner. We're starting to get a little bit of a sense of just that league table evening itself out, and a true kind of sense of where the runners and riders are. We're not that far away from magic, but of course this weekend 8 became 4 in the Betfred Challenge Cup. So we'll run through that. We'll start off with Catalans. A job done against Salford, very much a feeling of a job done. Everyone expected them to do that against that weakened Salford side. But across this season, Kyle, Catalans, they're still flattering to deceive a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, you're right, Lewis. I don't think they are where they certainly wouldn't want to be at the moment. So, before a ball was kicked, we'd have probably had Catalan, right up there as a solid top 6 side, top 4 side even. But they have flattered to deceive on a number of occasions this season. Yes, they've got the win. They're into the last 4 of the Challenge Cup, and that's great for them. But it was hardly really a convincing win against a very under strength and a bit mentally exhausted Salford, wasn't it?
Scully, it's a weird thing. I remember, you're probably going back 4 or 5 years, we used to have conversations about Catalans, and we talk about them being Jekyll and Hyde and the inconsistency. That went away for probably 3 seasons, a couple of grand finals in there, a league leaders shield. All of a sudden it just feels like, for whatever reason, it's creeping back in. That you just don't know what's turning up.
Yeah, it does. I think, you as you say, you don't know what you're going to get with Catalan week to week. And, for the players that they signed pre-season, as Kyle said, I think you'd see them as a top 4 finisher, most certainly. They're sat in 9th in the Betfred Super League at the moment, and it's just not working. I think they need to really work on that. I think that spine, as we spoke about before, I think that's what creates the organisation, and it's just not clicking at the moment.
They've got probably a month to get it right, though, obviously, into the semi-finals. And look, Challenge Cup finals in June, so your season can be a success as a club. By June, you can have that boxed off. But that's what they've got to look at here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, look, you're right. If they were to go on and win the Challenge Cup final, it would be deemed a success. But I just think it's almost a regression of Catalan. You mentioned the grand finals a couple of years ago. They just missed out on the playoffs last year, and then now they're sat 9th. That's a club under a fair bit of pressure. Given the amount of money they spend, given the resources they have, they really need to be heading north in that table. So, look, it's great. I've no doubt about it. The club will be really happy into the top 4, but they'll have to quickly turn their attention to Super League. We're only 6 or 7 rounds in, so there's still plenty of time left, but they need to put some performances together and climb back up.
Isn't that the magic of the Challenge Cup, though? How many seasons have you seen turn around for the worse or for the better? If you're not performing in Super League, and also, Catalan are proving that now. They're in the semi-finals. They go on and win it. Sometimes that can kickstart your season. I know the finals further down the line, but making it into that top 4, will that be a bit of a kickstart for Super League?
Yep.
As I say, we're a convincing performance, and I'm sure Steve Mack's looking for more this week.
Lee Leopards also in the hat in the semi-finals, the last 4. A really tough test. I was at that game against Wakefield on Friday night. It was an absolute belter. 2 teams, obviously Wakefield had beaten them quite convincingly the week before. 2 teams, 80 minutes, just hammer and tong. And Lee looked like a team, Carl, we've seen a few times this season in Golden Point games, that put them in the ropes, put them in a firefight in the last 10 minutes of a game, and they'll stick it out. Yeah, definitely. But I think you're right to mention the defeat to Wakefield a week earlier, the defeat to Hull KR prior to that. So it was important for Lee to get back on the horse, really, and a good win like that in the cup as well. And Lee have got, Derek Beaumont spoke, a number of times about his enjoyment of his side getting to the Challenge Cup, what it meant for him, what it meant for the town. So I've no doubt that they've got a huge goal in their mind to get back to Wembley and replicate that famous win over Hull KR a few seasons ago. So, look, Wakefield as well. They've been a side that's probably, we talked about Catalan there being in the top, or everybody having them in the top 4. A lot of people might have had Wakefield really struggling this year, but
they've brought quite a bit to Super League already, and they are such an entertaining, exciting team to watch as well. They throw the ball around inside their own yardage. They're equally as effective in good ball as well. And so a really solid win for Lee against what he's proven to be this year. Wakefield, a bit of a sticky, tricky side.
It's interesting with Lee as well, Scully. We sat here at the kind of probably mid to end point of last season as the departures were being confirmed and some of the names that were leaving the club, and you just wondered if this was going to be a rebuilding season. But the recruitment's been really good again, hasn't it?
It has. It's been excellent, has it? As you say, I don't think anybody expected to see the Lee that we've seen so far. In the opening 6 games of Super League, and Tessie New, you look at...
He was
class, isn't he?
Really impressive. I mean, he scored a really eye-catching try, but just his work throughout that 80 minutes on Friday, he was really impressive. Yeah, and I just think the League, probably over the last 3 years, is just a club that's grown in confidence on and off the field, and certainly on the field with that success in the Challenge Cup. And I think they go into games now, they're not fearful of the opposition. I think they really back their own ability and are showing that bit more consistency. But again, Lee have been there, they've done it in the Challenge Cup in the past few years, and this weekend they knew what was at stake. You only get one chance in a Challenge Cup quarter final and come up with a performance. We've mentioned the word consistency already quite a few times in this show. It's a really interesting thing this year because barring Hull KR at the top, I can't point at any other team and say they've been consistent, can you? It's a real kind of mix week in, week out as to which teams are performing and which teams are producing, Carl.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what makes it exciting for everyone who loves the game, all fans of the game, all stakeholders of the game. We don't quite see a clear. Obviously, you mentioned Hull KR there; they're yet to be beaten, but everybody else has tripped up and slipped up. Wigan, the champions as well. That's I think it's 2 losses to their name already, having only lost 4 last year. So yeah, there's a bit of inconsistency around a number of teams. And again, we're only 6 games in, so there's still 2/3 or just over 2/3 of the season left. So there's plenty of time for teams to lose form, teams to gain form, and it's usually around Easter time where we look at the table and we kind of start to get a bit of a clear picture. It might even be a couple of more rounds before we see that though this year.
Moving on to Hull KR, that game against Hull FC in the quarterfinals, they had the air, Scully, of like. So it's like when you watch a boxer just weather the first couple of the rounds, take the heat out of an opponent, and then that just 10-minute period where they struck back to back and they just looked really, really good, and they just seem to have that ability to ice things when they need to.
No doubt that'll have been mentioned for Willie Peters. You're going to get a Hull FC who are going to come out of the blocks. It's a massive derby game. So it's going to be a quick start. But Hull KR just back their own ability and the confidence that they're currently playing with, and like I say, I wasn't very much like Lee, but I think at another level over the last 2 years certainly really fancy themselves now as one of the best teams in the Super League that want to win silverware and think they can, and I think they can.
I'd love to sit, Kyle, in one of their team meetings when they're going through their attacking game plan and that kind of thing, because their ability to move the ball around and their ability to plot themselves into positions where they can strike and score points is almost a bit frightening at times this season. Yeah,
they've got threats all over, haven't they? And that's what all good teams do. All title-winning teams do. They don't just rely on individual set players. They rely on a number of, if you want to call them mavericks, who can change moments in big games. You look at Wigan in recent times. They'll have all their set and attack and everything, but when you've got Field and French in there, you've always got a chance of winning a tight game. Or Hull KR the same. What I've been really impressed with is they seem to have gone to another level with Jarrah Hargreaves and Mickey McLaurin, and although some people may look at that and say, well, there's perhaps other people who are doing equally what they're doing on the field. It's the stuff away, it's the stuff in training, it's the mentality that they get them excited about heading into a big game, creating narratives and stories about why they should go out and win that game, and that performance, 30-0 in the derby. That's a little bit more than just that's a preparation and an accumulation of conversations and things happening. So when they get out there, they nail and ice every single moment, and they've just got a real ruthlessness about them at the minute.
They've clearly, for me, they've got a really smart coach, and you talk about the detail, in training and what they practice. A lot of teams move the ball, but they don't do it and the execution of it. You know, sometimes you're moving the ball for the sake of moving the ball. Hull KR, they've got halves that play in the line, they've got halves that attract defenders, they've got home runners that pick holes and run with intensity. And I think that's the difference in them and a lot of other teams, certainly on attack.
And the other side of it is the defending. The way they're defending, they're getting off the line with intent. They really are suffocating and strangling their opposition when they need to. They sense moments when they've got them in bad places, and they really go after them with the defence. And you know, at the minute, they seem the real deal. You know, off the back of a couple of seasons of falling short, I think that little bit of desire to taste success is really, really burning deep inside Hull KR at the minute.
I've got to give a mention to Jez Luton as well, because I think, like a lot of people watching that game, when Mikey Lewis goes down in backfield, and even when he kind of forced himself back on, you think, well, that's a turning point.
Yeah.
But they didn't really lose any impetus to do it. I thought Jez Luton was absolutely outstanding.
I think he's been outstanding for a number of years. He's one of my favourite players in Super League. I had the pleasure of working with him on the England Nights programme and speaking to Saints to go and try and get him, because for me, he's probably the best 9 in the game. Just his pace, his vision, his intensity that he plays at, and you know, off the field, is one of the nicest guys you'll meet. Who's ultimate professional and committed to his cause, and I just think he's a massive asset to Hull KR.
Just quickly before we move on to the other game from the weekend, the positive for Hull FC, I thought, considering he'd been in the country 3-4 days, Kyle, Will Price obviously had that line break where he just caught everyone out going down the short side, and I thought there was enough there for Hull FC fans to leave going, well, you know, give him time to, you know, just get over jet lag more than anything, and he'll be a real kind of contender.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and like, you know, like all halfbacks will tell you, you know, they want to play off the back of a pack that's going forward. And, you know, you're right to mention Will Price, but for me, I think up there alongside Alex Walmsley and Mike McMeekin and Herman Esse, you know, the form that those three have started Super League in is pretty impressive. And you know, the game hasn't changed for 100 years. You've got to roll down the field first before you can play. And Will Price will certainly be licking his lips off the back of Asiata and Herman Esse for sure.
Moving on and continuing on that theme of talking about halfbacks, Mark Sneyd, as a pickup, the circumstances, okay, obviously concerning in a lot of senses around the Salford situation, but picking a player of Mark Sneyd's quality up 4 weeks into a season could be the thing that, you know, changes, not turns the season around for Warrington, because we were so young into it, but what a boost that is, and it puts them into title contenders. It certainly puts them into Wembley contenders, obviously.
Yeah, and the thing is with Sneedy, he's such a humble guy as well. You know, he'll have such an impact on the players around him, you know, during the week, not just on game day. But I think the way he manages a game, you know, he's never going to be one that'll take on the line and make breaks, but he'll organise everybody else, and the best kicking game in Super League by a country mile. And I just think his man management of the game, but taking control of that. You know, watched one of the Warrington games a couple of weeks ago, and the way he shoves George Williams out of the way. It was against Saints in Super League, and it was the kick through for George Williams. You know, he'll just control that, let George play. And I think we've seen at weekend, you know, what George Williams is capable of when he's not got any of them restraints of trying to organise everybody else around him. He just does what he does best.
Yeah, I was just going to echo exactly what Scully said there. You know, all the best halfbacks, the partnerships you'll have played with, that I'll have played with, they usually have one runner and one controller, don't they? And Warrington have been lacking that a bit, and a lot's been put on George Williams' shoulder. George Williams is at his absolute best when he's able just to run, and he's able just to be, you know, a maverick, create things. He sees things that other halves don't see. But with Mark Sneyd just being, he sits so deep, he's got that ball on a string, he can put it wherever you want, and I think it's just going to be a real interesting combination, watching it build, and you know, come towards the end of the year, it'll certainly be a huge threat. It's already proven a threat at the moment, but give these two another 10 games under the belt, you'll really see the very best of them.
I'll just throw the name up in the air at this point and let you two have at it. St Helens, discuss.
Yeah, they're in games. For me, they're just lacking so much on attack. Again, we talk about teams who move the ball, but it's that final execution. I think they're letting themselves down with individual skill, and probably lacking that bit of control from the halfbacks. You know, where I mentioned about Hull KR halves, you know, playing in the line, and players running with intent. I don't see Saints doing that at the moment, and it's all great moving the ball and having that bit more expansion, what everybody's called for, but there's got to be an end goal with it, and you win games by scoring points, and unfortunately we're not a big enough threat at the moment on attack.
Yeah, just touching on that game, for me, too many yardage errors in a big game. You know, you cannot afford to give a team like Warrington, you know, shooting out for a last four place in a big game. There's just far too many mistakes coming out of yardage, and I thought, look, if I'm being really honest, I thought, you know, everybody sort of bulled him up, and I got excited a little bit about seeing Tristan Saylor, but I thought he got exposed defensively at the weekend. I thought there was a number of occasions where they nearly got Saints, and there was certainly one that led to a penalty, and then you know, there was just too much traffic in and around him, and I think teams are starting to look. He scored 6 tries this season. He's hit second in the try scoring department. Obviously 4 of those were, if you want to call them, gift wrap at Salford that day, but defensively I think he's got a bit of work to do. I think teams are now starting to look at that and go, there's the joy at Saints, let's expose it, and I thought they did. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of work to do down that right edge, I think, for Saints, and I agree with Scully. You know, you've got to be able to look. They got right back into the game, didn't they? You know, Darryl Clark's tried, he got in there, but Saints at the minute they're just not able to have any kind of luck with Warrington. I think that's 6 occasions now, the last 6 games that Warrington have got them, and Scully's right, they've been in games, and on another day it can go the other way, but it's a result-based business, and credit to Warrington, they got the job done.
I think at the moment as well, you know, you look at them edges, and they have been picked up again with some injuries. You know, I think 3 HIAs in that Warrington game, and all on the edges. So you've got Joe Batchelor in the centre who got busted for pace, and probably that takes away a lot of your attacking threat anyway. But like I say, on defence, they need to be better as well.
Your halfbacks, I mean, for me, your halfbacks, you've got to be able to defend. You know, the teams that win things in the end, their halves usually are solid defenders. And look, Tristan may have had a bad day. That he may have, and it happens. Do you know what I mean? But it wouldn't surprise me if a bit more traffic comes down his way soon.
I think on attack, just with the lack of control with the halves at the moment, I think if you can't play that game, play what game you can play best, and for me, Tristan Saylor is running the ball. You know, I thought Saints in that second half had a few moments where you get Big Al, who spoke about how good Alex Walmsley's been this year, and it gives the opportunity for Darryl Clarke, who's one of the best 9s in the game, from dummy half to jump, to spot things, and Clarke was causing Warrington lots of problems. So if that isn't working for you, going wide and shifting and playing at the edges, do what you do best, and Saints have always, you know, when they get on that juggernaut, it's difficult to stop, you know, with the big fellas. So do that and play what's getting you success.
I just want to touch on one final point in the Challenge Cup before we move on. I've always loved the Betfred Challenge Cup. It's a fantastic competition. It's a thing that's really unique to our bit of rugby league, you know what I mean? But this year, Carl, you've been involved in our coverage on the Sportsman of the Challenge Cup right from round 1. The format with the teams coming in earlier, the seeding, the way that it was done, the upsets, the draws. I just think we're up to the semi-finals, and for me, there's no way this can't be a vintage year of it now. It's been so good. It's been a real point of just joy in this season for me, the way that the Betfred Challenge Cup has been. And look, when you look at the 4 teams that are left, you can only see that you're going to get a final that's going to be close. Yeah, no, for definite. I think the winners of Saturday's and Sunday's game for me is the final. I think it will be OKR and Warrington. I wouldn't write. Lee have got the capability of pulling out a result on the day, don't get me wrong. I don't think Catalan will have enough in that time to get there. But, you know, you think back to that OEF against Oral St James's where it all started, Lewis, back in January. And you're right, there's been, you know, all those crowds where the Super League sides, you know, St Helens taking on West Hull, for example, and Whitehaven against Warrington. And it really did bring back, it brought, like, big crowds to clubs that look, let's be honest, as we fall out of Super League and go down, it's getting harder and harder and harder to run clubs, and those paydays in the Challenge Cup,
people may not realise, but that ties them over for pretty much a full season, you know, and it's important that the game is for everybody, and it's important that the magic of the cup, you know, is brought back to those core areas of where the, you know, the heartlands of the game is, and everybody can celebrate it. But yeah, I just think it's going to be two cracking semi-finals, and yeah, you're right. I think the final will be one for the ages.
A couple of just headlines I want to rattle through before we look at this weekend's action of the Betfred Super League. Probably the big signing news this week: Callum Watkins, Scully goes back to Leeds. The Salford situation rumbles on, but from a Leeds perspective, so it's another very good pickup, isn't it? 6, 7
Yeah, it is. You know, Callum's got a lot of experience. Very much a different player than the one that they sold. Obviously, you know, a world-class centre back in the day. Now playing in the forwards, and a lot bigger man than he was when he left Leeds. But you know, huge ability, and Leeds obviously know that. They know what kind of guy that Callum is and what he'll bring.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because you know they actually wanted rid of Callum a while back. You know, let's not forget that Leeds were the ones who sold him and advised him to move on, and it's sports mad, isn't it? Come back full circle, and now they're willing him back in there. His leadership, his skill, his quality, just him as a bloke as well. Do you know what I mean? That's something that sometimes we overlook in sport, what they're like in and around training, and the rub-off effect they can have on youngsters. And I think Cal's all class, isn't he? He is, and he's proven that an unfashionable club like Salford, he's back where he probably belongs.
I think that'll be a big part of that signing, won't it? It will be, you know, how much he's grown over them years, and the leadership. You know, don't forget he was part of a very, very you know, good successful Leeds side. You know, and maybe that influence, they're looking to take that back, and everything that he's learned on the way. Obviously, captain in Salford, and yeah, I think it's a good signing for Leeds.
Yeah. And then just quickly, Kyle, last time that you were in here, we were talking about the Ashes being announced. Well, Headingley's already sold out.
Class.
Sounds like Everton's well on the way. I think they're positive about the sales at Wembley as well. It's all positive on that front.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, Scully's been there and done it, hasn't he? And you know what it must be like to play in potentially two, if not hopefully, we can get Wembley sold. That'll be a difficult ask, but nevertheless, even if you got 60,000-70,000 in Wembley, it'd be a huge success. The players would feel, as they should do on that stage, playing for England, playing against Australia in the Ashes. It's the pinnacle of anybody's career. I certainly would have loved to be able to do it. I wasn't as good enough, so
Scully's closer than me.
Scully's probably your man to probably evaluate what that must feel like.
You are sat there smiling when we talk about it.
Yeah. For me, it's the pinnacle of the game is England v Australia. You know, we've not done it since 2003. I was at the RFL this morning, you know, with some of the commercial team and looking at the Ashes, and it's just such an exciting time. I think, you know, it's going to be massive, and great to see Headingley's already sold out. Everton's well on the way. Imminent to sell out, and then Wembley, which is going to be obviously the first game of England v Australia Test series. You know, why wouldn't you get along to that? But it's going to be epic, and you know, I think there's a lot of great things going on. You know, we speak about some of the stuff off the field, you know, which sometimes blights our game. But you know, on the field, we look at Super League. You know, it's anybody's to win. Challenge Cup, the magic we've just spoke about there, and then you've got an Ashes series, which is going to be the biggest thing, you know, probably within the game over the last 3 decades. So
wouldn't it be brilliant if they could get an early win? You know, in game 1 or game 2, if England could get a win and set that up at Headingley, already sold out. You know, for me, I might be speaking a bit ambitiously, but it would put it right up there in terms of viewers at home with the Six Nations game. 1-1 against, you know, Australia for that sold out crowd. You know, it would be right up there in terms of fans across from both cores. I've no doubt would tune in and have a little look at it, wouldn't they?
Well, Sean's going to have them bouncing off the walls, isn't he? They're going to
just a bit.
That first carry at that Wembley game is going to be unbelievable, right?
Just don't do what Adrian Moore is. If it's an Australian carry. Sorry, boss.
Let's move on to this week's action of the Betfred Super League then, and I'm getting a bit sick of having to do this little kind of caveat every week, but Salford Red Devils against Leeds Rhinos. Yeah. Salford still in special measures, obviously losing Callum Watkins. I think we can all point at a comfortable Leeds Rhinos win, can't we?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, but they had a dig against Catalan, didn't they? So, and if you go into any game of rugby league, regardless of who's paying, and your attitude's not quite where it needs to be, or you're just hoping that you're going to do enough to get through, There's still a number of quality players still left at Salford. Now, I agree with you, by the way. I don't think they'll win this weekend, but I think if Leeds come and just dip the toe in, it wouldn't surprise me if they did turn them over. But I don't think that'll happen. But Salford that team will get a scalp, no doubt about it. Over the course of a season, they'll take one. Who that is, well, that's up for Brad Arthur and that to realise that it shouldn't be them this week.
It is difficult for Leeds, isn't it? Because when you go into that game expected to win, they've got to be professional, they've got to get a job done. And they're a team that, they've not been bad by any stretch at the beginning of this season. They've shown some really good bits, but they've got to put some performances in.
Yeah, you've got to credit Salford and the players who have played for the resilience that they've shown in them performances. Yeah, quality might have told in the end, but for me, Leeds, if I was coaching, I wouldn't even mention Salford. I'd be looking at everything that we do as a team, the standards, the quality, the skill level, the effort on defence. Don't talk about the opposition because you can't control that. What you can control is your own performance, and Leeds have got to be professional and go there and do a job.
Leeds were very unlucky, weren't they, the week before again at Warrington? They were in command for a lot of that game, and again, credit Warrington, they managed to find a way to win it. But they missed out last week with being out of the cup, having lost to St Helens in the round earlier. So they'll be wanting to get back after this. They'll have been refreshed for having a week off, and they'll be ready to give this rest of this season a full tilt.
Friday night. What a game this is. Grand final rematch. Hull KR flying. Wigan, it feels weird to say they need to bounce back from a strange start to the season, but what a performance. We talk about games around every week and all of that kind of stuff, Carl. This could be one of the games of the season.
Yeah, it should be, shouldn't it? Champions v Chasers, if you want to call it that. A repeat of the grand final. Also, as well, just a little bit of side bit. Willie Peters and Matty Pete had that little bit of needle in that documentary, didn't they? So I don't know how much that plays into it. I don't think it does, but for us who are sitting back here, it makes it a bit more spicier, doesn't it? So, plenty to go at and a really high quality game, we hope.
This should be a proper throwdown.
It will be, yeah, absolutely, no doubt. And I think it's a big challenge for Wigan. Hull KR's a tough place to go at the best of times. But the way that team are playing, and it's Wigan coming off a few, obviously a big win against Salford in their last performance in Super League. But I think it's a massive challenge.
But equally, Scully, it's a huge marker for Hull KR, isn't it? With what happened in the grand final, that one try, I think it was 9-2. It's Hull KR's chance to actually go lucky. If we win this, we're 6 points clear of you, and we're all raving about ourselves now. So, yeah, it's whichever camp you sit in, it's going to be interesting.
Predictions?
Depending on whether Michael Lewis plays.
It sounds like he's not.
He's not playing. I think
the suggestion is that he'll be back in time for Good Friday, but we'll miss this one.
I think he's a big loss for Hull KR. Obviously, he's the current man of steel and a massive part of that Hull KR side. I expect a response from Wigan. I think it'd be very, very close. I'm going to tip Hull KR just.
Yeah, I think me too as well. I fancy Hull KR there. But if Wigan can win, well, it just reminds everybody what a classy quality outfit they are. So, yeah, I think Hull KR just might have a little bit more on Friday.
It's St Helens Wakefield. It's probably not, the kind of all fireworks selling point of the game we've just spoken about is, but I'll tell you what, it's an interesting fixture.
It sure is. And, Scully mentioned before those HIAs, so there'll be no Mark Percival, no Jake Wingfield. I think Lewis Murphy being added into the squad, if he's back fit, I thought he was looking really sharp before he got his injury. And young Noah Stevens, I think, bizarrely, I think they've missed a little bit of his variety of carry. I think he could, it's important that you don't play these young kids all season. They have to dip them in and out. But I think it's ready for Noah to come and, I think him and George Delaney had a sensational game against Wigan last year, and I think Noah, if I cast my mind back, he'd had missed a couple of games beforehand, and I just think that they might need him. It sounds stupid to say that about such a young kid, but it's going to be an interesting one. Wakefield, they're a team that team really hasn't changed too much from last season. Yeah, I know they brought a couple of additions in, but last year they were just able to methodically go about win after win after win and build some really good habits, and that's why I mentioned when they move the ball inside their own yardage and they move it in good ball, they look fluid and they look dangerous, and they're confident as well. You know, they've picked up some decent wins along the way, so it'll be a really interesting game. This
Predictions, Scully?
I think there's a lot of pressure on Saints for this game, because I think looking at it as a fixture, I think it's a game that Saints at home against Wakefield should win. It'd be interesting for me how well all plays it. You know, we spoke about the pack. I think Walmsley's been outstanding. I think Parsy's been outstanding. Delaney, Stevens coming back. Do you change the way you play? Certainly with lacking a bit of strike on the edges. You know, you've lost Robertson, you've lost Percival, Felt's out. You know, do Saints go utterly ruthless here? Maybe a bit boring, and just play through the middle of Wakefield and just set their standards really on defence, and then playing to and through Wakefield. But I think Saints at home, it's a game they've got to win.
Yeah.
Moving into Saturday, another game. I think this will be a lot of fun as well. Warrington Hull FC, you know, two teams right in amongst it in terms of being top of the table at the early stage. Warrington had a good result the weekend, obviously. I think this is really difficult to call. Yeah,
I think, you know, Warrington are winning games, and they're winning big games too against Saints in the last 3 weeks. But I still don't think they're playing exceptional. Hull, inconsistent. You know, some games we see outstanding performance like the Wigan win, and then not so. You know, the week after. But again, with that Sneed factor, I just think it's a game for Warrington.
Result, Carl?
I'm going to go Warrington as well. I think they've, like Scully's mentioned, they're winning games, and when you win, it becomes a habit, doesn't it? And I think it's important for Hull FC to recognise the journey that they're on. You look at the neighbours over the road at Hull KR and where they've come over the last couple of years with probably a better roster. Hull are much improved this season, no doubt about it, but they will have performances like they did at the weekend, and they're building at the moment. They've got some new recruits already announced for next season. It's going to take a little bit of time, so I think Warrington win it.
Castleford versus Lee Leopards also on Saturday, Carl. Everything points towards Lee getting the win.
Yeah.
I feel, when you were saying about Salford will pick up a scalp, I think Castleford will pick up, it probably won't be scalps, but you know, they'll upset a few this season. Does it come in this one?
I think you could call them scalps, because for me, I think they're probably almost thankful that Huddersfield and what's happening at Salford kind of keeps a little bit of pressure off them. I think their roster's nowhere near where it needs to be in Super League, and that's not harsh for me to say, because I've done a couple of their games now and I've seen the performances, and they just shoot themselves in the foot every single time. Their inability to build any kind of pressure at this level just gets exposed every single week. Now, having said that, there's a couple of little gems in there, but they're just not giving themselves any opportunity in any game, and you know, you can hear the frustration or you can read quotes from Danny Maguire or hear what he says, and that's a winner who knows how to win games, and he must agree, because the comments that he's saying, his team just can't recognise what to do in a game, and it sounds harsh, doesn't it? But you're in Super League, you've got to know what you're doing and know your role and do it.
Rounded off the weekend, Scully, Huddersfield versus Catalans. Huddersfield desperate for something, just desperate for some points on the board. Catalans will take some confidence from that win against Salford. Is there an upset in this game?
I don't think there is. I think Catalan will have too much for Huddersfield. Yeah, they're coming off a win. They're not playing great, but Huddersfield are awful. Absolutely awful, and no wins in Super League yet. With the money that they've spent, I can't see. You know, you look at the last performance in Super League, 50 points to 4 by Hull KR, who, we know are on fire. But the Huddersfield side, with some of the players that they've got, shouldn't be turning in performances like that. And I just think Catalan will, you know, they'll smell blood. They know Huddersfield are struggling, and you know, is this a game where Catalan can really turn on a performance?
Yeah, gents, absolute pleasure as ever having you with us. Said at the top of the show that we weren't going to talk about the off-the-field issues. I still don't want to. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of rumours. there'll be a lot of other podcasts and a lot of other people that are going to talk about those things and address what those things are. We've just sat here for half an hour and spoken about rugby league and what's going on the field, and let's just have some perspective. At the centre of it all is the sport, and the sport continues to deliver.
Yeah, it certainly does, doesn't it? You know, you talked about, for me, sport's about creating drama and jeopardy and stories, and we've already had that in the opening 6 rounds and in the Challenge Cup as well. So, you know, long may that continue. The cream will always rise to the top in this game, and so far that sits with the red and whites of Hull KR.
Look, we'll love it, Scully. That's why I think probably everyone's quite wound up at the moment. But yeah, we all love this sport.
We do, you know, we care a lot about it. You know, it's been all our lives, you know, all the way through. And as you say, you know, we've just spoke for half an hour there about all the great things that's happening in the game. You know, hopefully, you know, the powers that be can sort out the rest. You know, because the players deliver, you know, week in, week out, and we've got such a sellable product, you know, on the field.
Well, gents, absolute pleasure to have you with us. Big weekend coming up in the Betfred Super League. As we've mentioned, we have our Final Four in the Betfred Challenge Cup, and then next week, one of the best weekends, one of the best days of the year, Good Friday, a staple in rugby league, and this year is looking like it's going to be an absolute belter. So we'll see you next week for all of that. Enjoy the Betfred Super League, Championship, League One, whatever you're watching, action this week, and we'll see you again.
This is my time.